Hi everyone, and welcome to an episode of Plugins for Dummies by a Dummy. This is the first episode, and we are going to talk about why plugins. So, why plugins and why now? In an era where we are just seeing technology just leaps and bounds every single day, I'm suddenly talking about plugins, and some of you are going to say, like, well, plugins, didn't we do that back in 2007? Yeah, you did. They worked pretty well then, and actually they work pretty well now. But in order to put this in context, I need to sort of reason why I'm doing this. So I am a functional consultant. I am not a developer. Or am I, right? And this is where the borderlines of who is what and what is what, I don't really think is very clear anymore, because back in the days, around 2007, when I started doing dynamics, I obviously wasn't a developer. I was a functional consultant. Eventually also becoming, more senior functional consultant, but still, like touching a bit of JavaScript, not doing anything which was defined as development. But then again, what is development? So what I kind of feel like I'm doing right now is like I'm bringing back, like, talking about the dark arts, right? We have all our great devs, and we know the ones in the community that are just amazing. I am not a dev. I still don't consider myself a dev, because when I see what they do, it's like, oh no, I'm not there. But the thing is, I know everyone hates ChatGPT about now. This is, people talk about it too much. I am not going to focus on ChatGPT and it's like, ooh, this is the future and everything. But I will say one thing though, whether or not AI or not, I just came out of paternity leave and I decided to see if I was capable of leveling up my technical skills. And the reason I kind of ChatGPT was good for me, because it just came out, was because it's available whenever I was available, and I was only available during nighttime after I'd put my baby to sleep. Interestingly enough, I started asking it questions, and I also blogged about this. It's like I asked it, like, okay, can you write a plugin with a scenario where I have a parent-child entity and I need to sum these things up into the parent entity from the child? Because these are typical things that I did a lot of workarounds with, either, workflows with custom actions, or I even made some roll-up fields, stuff like that. But then I kind of just asked it, could you write the code for me? And it started writing the code. And I was like thinking, like, holy crap, if this is writing code for me, how far away am I from actually using it? So I took this code back to my developer, and I started talking to him about how can I actually use this, or is it usable? You looked at it, it's like, yeah, this is pretty usable. But of course you need to do some things here, and you need to understand the basic concepts of a plugin. It's like, well, is it really hard? Is it, well, everything depends, like, right? But using a few hours with him and lots of hours with ChatGPT, I'm suddenly able to do plugins, which I wasn't able before. And as a functional consultant, I can now actually deliver simple plugins to customers with success. Sure, I'm using ChatGPT for the syntax, because syntax for me is still very vague. I don't understand it. I'm a copy-paste programmer, which I honestly think a lot of us are. But the thing is that it was kind of amazing that I can now do this stuff. But again, why am I talking about this? Why am I even wasting time for people talking about, like, oh, we're doing plugins right now, and I don't want to be a developer? But here's the thing. Let's just take a few steps back, right? So every CRM consultant, if we put ourselves on the left side, right? We've been in Dataverse forever. What Dataverse is today is basically what we were configuring our database way back then. And eventually things evolved, we got online, etc. And suddenly we get into the sort of whole of, we are now a power platform, which opens up a space of completely different consultants. So where we come from, a very dynamics-based, we know what Dataverse is, we are suddenly now in a world where we have what we call the citizen developer. So the citizen developer is being used by Microsoft in every single time we are hearing presentations. Oh, the citizen developers are just making leaps and bounds and stuff like that. I get that, but there's a few things we need to think about. So the typical, what I would say the citizen developer at the moment, and I could be wrong, but this is my personal sort of experience. what we see from the citizen developers, what we all can agree, okay, we can all agree what we like now, and is that the level of change that we can do within an organization is going a lot faster now that we have the low-code platforms that we are using compared to what we did before when we needed the developers to make progress. So that being said, we love, and everybody loves, the low-code platform. But what I do see is that a lot of these citizen developers are also coming from backgrounds that are, represented by technology, which we see at the bottom here. Stuff like SQL, it could be SharePoint, Excel, or even Access, right? They don't have the same background in ways to shape and form the applications which we have been doing in Dynamics, which is good because they think very outside of the box in my head, because I think a complete different way. So I think it's kind of good that we're kind of being pushed in each direction, but at the same time, I think it's good that some of them might know about the technical capabilities that we have in the platform, because I see some of them doing weird things, whereas they could have, implemented everything just a little bit different. But I mean, some things are preference, of course. But I mean, of course, everyone can agree. Okay, so we all gather around this Power Platform. Even it doesn't matter if you're a Dynamics consultant or if you're a SharePoint consultant or, Office consultant or whatever, you SQL, and you kind of gather in because now we're seeing a local platform. But what I find odd is the people that don't come from the Dynamics world seem to always talk about Power Automate as being like, this is great. So Power Automate is great, and I even stand on the stage saying that this is giving me superpowers, because it actually is. I really love Power Automate, but I also don't love it. So the thing is that it does give me superpowers in many ways. But at the same time, I always have to have in the constant discussion of, do I trust this? Do I trust it with my life? The same way I would with what we call classic workflows. And I'll get back to that. And the simple answer is that, well, not really. Because to me, Power Automate is still, I wouldn't call it a playground, but it's still a very big of a thing of a work in progress, right? We can make things work here. But if I would trust a business critical solution to be 100% powered by Power Automate, maybe. Depending. But at that point, I would probably be thinking code. And that's also why we have different options. If we just think about the connector for Dataverse, I think we're on our 4th connector right now. Meaning stability for Power Automate, it's like you gotta know that when you implement it, you also have to support it. And a lot of the things that we were doing before with automation in Dataverse or Dynamics, we did a lot of automation that wasn't as complex as this, because now we can talk to different APIs, etc. But it was probably a little bit more code-based, and it worked a lot more of the time. Yeah, of course, you can navigate over to Logic Apps, and if you want to be even more than that, you can combine Logic Apps and Power Automate or Flows, with Azure Functions. So there are many things that you can do to be very code intensive, which is what I'm kind of getting to. Is like, when does it become like a playground where you're making cool things and saying like, okay, we're going from dev now to production, and this is actually business critical. So at this point, we should probably do code, because we need to make sure that this runs all the time, right? In some cases, it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. Beside the point. So what I don't like about these things is that they're asynchronous. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but there were a few blog posts from Microsoft, back in the days when Power Automate was being released, and it was like, okay, everyone get ready, because now we're going all Power Automate. Get all your flows, workflows. That's what we call them. Get all your classic workflows and push them up into Power Automate. And it's like someone just raised their hand, like, wait a minute. We have a few things called synchronous classic workflows. What about them? And it's like, oh crap, yeah, what about them? So it's like, well, I'm on the left side here, so like seeing the future, Microsoft pushing everything to be like, oh, asynchronous is like the, goods thing. And yeah and no. But I think it's important to know that as a consultant, we are capable of choosing. And you're capable of choosing if you decide to agree to, I need to level up and not necessarily be dependent. So, as a classical functional consultant, I'm pretty sure you can agree to the following. You have been doing one of the 5 here. If you have not been doing one of the 5 here, how can you even say that you're a classical Dataverse consultant, right? And when I say functional consultant in Dataverse, remember, I am Dynamics consultant. I'm talking about model-driven apps. I'm not talking about Canvas at the moment, okay? But all of these things somehow deliver value, but you kind of need to combine all of them, which then again makes it confusing to see, because every one of these brings value in their own way, but at the same time brings limitations, right? So if we just look at the business rules, so what we have here in business rules is like the biggest issue I have with business rules is that when you start having lots of them, it's impossible to read. I mean, it's like you have different rules here, but what are they doing? You need to open every single one of these rules by themselves in order to read the code. Taking over business rules from another consultant is terrible because you don't know what they were thinking at the moment. But business rules has a lot of power also because they can actually do server-side processing because you can put it at the entity level. But it also has like extremely annoying issues, like you can't hide show sections, but for some reason you can hide show fields but not sections. You know, we never really understood why, but it's just like that. And now we kind of just come to terms with that. Maybe business rules will never even give us that because something else new and shiny is coming around the corner, right? Could be. But business rules for me, I don't like it. I understand that it's being used. Personally, don't really like them. I kind of hate them, to be honest. And here, this is the new stuff, right? Calculated or formula columns. I'm not 100% sure if it's called formula columns, but it's the Power FX columns that are coming in. So the power, if we just start with calculated, here's my biggest issue. I'm aware that we can use them, but look at this. This is a table, the main table, or in this case, and this is a column list of all columns in that table. How do I know which one of them are calculated, or even a formula column? I can't see that here. And it bugs me. And if I even was capable of seeing it, I can't see the function unless I actually click every single field and open it. It's like, that's the same thing as the issues I have with Canvas apps. Whereas the code is always located to the one singular button or the one singular something, and you have to go click around just to see all the code instead of having all code gathered in one place. And the same thing, roll-up fields. Roll-up fields are, I mean, they're stupid, but they're great. I mean, it's like, I hate them, but sometimes I end up using them. The problem I have with roll-up fields is that there's a recalculate button, because if you click the recalculate button, it will actually calculate the sum of or some type of function, and whatever the calculation you can do is extremely limited anyway. That turns out to become sort of the functional consultant's answer to, I can't write a plugin to do this, but we have calculated fields, so I'm going to use it. And I'm just going to tell the user, just click the recalculate button, because that's going to make sense to them, right? It doesn't make sense to them. So, of course, we have ways to get around this with workflows that can trigger and stuff like that. But then again, we're talking about workaround because we are not taking the time to understand what a plugin is and if it could be simple. And, of course, this I love. I love the classic workflows. I mean, there's everything about them I love. Because when you set up a classic workflow, you can either have it do as an asynchronous process, that's fine, like it's set up here. Or you could say, I want this to be live instant. And when you go live instant, it is instant. It's the same as a plugin. And you can control configuration of what's going to happen. Of course, the UI here is crap. It will never get better because this is not something that they're putting money into. I highly doubt. But it works. These bad boys here have a few things like upgrades that I've been doing like since 4.0, where I've been doing server upgrades. They worked. And every single upgrade, They always work. And it's like 99% working. All of the time, it just works. I can trust them. And it's a part of the Dynamics platform, or sorry, Dataverse. That's why they can be trusted. So if I were to say, like, if you want to trust your life into something, which I wouldn't do anyway, but more as like, would you choose a classical workflow over a Power Automate? Classical workflow, 10 out of 10 times, unfortunately. But that's because this will just work. I'm sorry, I'm old school, I'm boring. That's okay. But here, okay, let's look at a developer. So developer, we typically say a developer is, you know, they do plugins and JavaScript within Dynamics. Which is cool. And then we have some functional consultants that also do JavaScript. But because we do it for hide shows, stuff like that. But we never really talk about the people wanting to see what is a plugin. How far away is it? Because this is the why. I mean, when you're talking about plugins, this is the why. JavaScript and plugins, you can, for a single entity, or even more, you can go into a file and you can read every part of the logic in a single file. I don't have to open 10 fields to see what is being calculated. I don't have to go behind the scenes of many things to sort of try to figure out what is actually, the point of what are we trying to achieve here. In JavaScript, I can open a single file and I can see all the logic. That's easy to read. Once you know how to read it, it is as simple as anything you would do with the Canvas apps, Formula FX or whatever. And the same on the right side with the plugins. So the plugins here, I mean, it's the same thing. I understand that they don't make sense in the beginning. They don't to me either. But the whole point is I'm about to do something about that. Because I want us to sort of say, as a consultant, let's learn functional consultant, let's learn plugins. Okay? And the why is the next time you choose to use a business rule, or the next time you choose to use a calculated field or formula column, it is because that makes sense. Not because you don't know how to do a plugin, or not because you do not know how to do JavaScript. Make it so that it is a choice because that is the right choice for the right situation. Because we all, as all functional consultants, we've all been in a situation where I don't have the developer available. And I can't do the developer available for 1 or 2 hours of hiding and showing a few fields because I don't want to touch JavaScript, or I don't want to touch plugins for some simple calculations. Okay? As a functional consultant, let's see if we can make it true what I'm saying here. Plugins for dummies by a dummy. The dummy would be me. And see if we can make it happen. See if we can actually do this, okay? And yes, it will be extremely boring to begin with. I'm going to do the same thing that we always do, and we're just going to do the absolute simple things, and we're going to do step-by-step instructions, starting with the hello world. How to get a plugin working. After we do the hello world, we're going to do simple calculations, integer calculations. We're going to do currency calculations. We are going to look into regex. And eventually, we're going to go over to what I call the advanced plugin, where we're going to see how we do a sum from a child to a parent. And those are the basic plugins that, as a functional consultant, see that I would need like 90% of the time I do code. And then we can leave the rest to the developers when they need to do integrations, okay? Because let's just say that if we can do the basics will be good enough. And we've leveled up a bit. And we now are doing choices not based on our limitations. We're doing choices based on what is actually best for the customer. Okay? So, please stay tuned on this channel. And I will make lots of even shorter videos than this, not 19 minutes, 20 minutes in this case. I'll make them very short and very simple and to the point. Stay tuned.